The ultimatum. When pride meets reality. The station hung in the darkness between stars like a forgotten monument. Station Kepler 7 had been humanity's first diplomatic outpost beyond the Sol system, built with hope and careful optimism. Now it served as the stage for what might be humanity's greatest mistake or finest moment. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck, watching distant nebulae paint the void in shades of purple and gold. She was 43, lean from years of military discipline, with black hair pulled tight and eyes that missed nothing. Behind her, the station hummed with nervous energy as crew members prepared for visitors no one truly wanted to meet. The collective was coming. 3 species bound by ancient treaties and older grudges. They had ruled this sector of space for 12,000 years, long before humans learned to make fire. Their ships were legends, their weapons could crack planets, and their patience with newcomers had run completely dry. The arrival. The first ship appeared without warning. One moment the void was empty. The next, a vessel 3 kilometers long materialized as if reality itself had stepped aside to let it through. It was beautiful in a terrible way, all flowing curves and surfaces that seemed to drink in starlight rather than reflect it. 2 more ships followed, each from a different species, each massive beyond reason. They formed a triangle around Station Kepler 7, close enough that their weapons could reduce the human outpost to atoms in seconds. Sarah's communication officer, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, looked up from his console with wide eyes. Marcus was young, barely 25, brilliant with languages and codes but new to the weight of real consequences. "Commander, they're hailing us." All 3 ships at once. "Put them through." Sarah's voice was steady. She had learned steadiness in the ruins of Seattle after the Cascadia earthquake, pulling survivors from collapsed buildings while the ground still trembled. This was just another crisis. Just another moment where staying calm meant the difference between life and death. The holographic display flickered to life, showing 3 faces that would never be human. The first belonged to Archon Vrel of the Exatheri, a being that looked like someone had tried to sculpt a person from volcanic glass and lightning. Its eyes were too many, arranged in patterns that hurt to follow. The second was Matriarch Silene of the Corthan Unity, massive and insectoid with mandibles that clicked in rhythm with her breathing. The third was Elder Terminus of the Voidborn Collective, barely visible inside a containment suit filled with gases that would dissolve human flesh in seconds. The message. "Humans of Station Kepler 7, Archon Vrel's voice came through perfectly translated but still wrong, like music played on instruments made from screaming metal. We speak for the collective assembly, representing the sovereign powers of this galactic region. You will hear our words and you will comply." Sarah clasped her hands behind her back. "I'm Commander Sarah Chen. I'm authorized to negotiate on behalf of the Terran Republic." "There will be no negotiation," Matriarch Silene cut in, her mandibles snapping. "You are new. You are small. You do not understand your place. We are here to teach you." Marcus tensed beside Sarah, but she gave the slightest shake of her head. "Let them talk. Let them reveal themselves." Elder Terminus spoke next, its voice like wind through empty corridors. 60 years ago, your species achieved faster-than-light travel. 40 years ago, you made first contact with our collective. We offered you guidance. We offered you a place in the natural order. You refused. We preferred independence, Sarah said simply. Independence is for species that have earned it, Vrel replied. Your species has spread to 17 star systems without permission. You have claimed resources that belong to elder civilizations. You have built weapons that violate the harmony accords that have kept this region stable for millennia. Sarah felt her jaw tighten but kept her expression neutral. The weapons they mentioned were defensive installations, nothing more. The resources were from uninhabited systems that the collective had never even surveyed. And the harmony accords had never been shared with humanity because we were considered too primitive to understand them. The terms. The collective assembly has reached a unanimous decision, Silene announced. You will accept the following terms immediately. First, all human colonies beyond your home system will be dissolved within one standard cycle. Second, all human military vessels will be surrendered to collective authority. Third, all human technology will be reviewed and restricted to approved levels. Fourth, humanity will provide resource tribute equal to 40% of your total economic output annually. Marcus couldn't stay quiet. 40%. That would cause mass starvation. Fifth, Terminus continued as if the young officer hadn't spoken, humanity will accept collective governors to oversee your compliance. These terms are final. You have 90 standard hours to begin implementation. Refusal will result in military action. The transmission ended. The three alien faces disappeared, leaving Sarah and her crew staring at empty air. For a long moment, no one spoke. The observation deck was silent except for the quiet hum of life support and the distant creaking of the station's superstructure. The response. Then, slowly, Sarah began to laugh. It started as a quiet chuckle, then built into genuine, uncontrolled laughter that echoed off the curved walls. Marcus stared at her like she'd lost her mind. The other bridge officers exchanged worried glances. Commander? Marcus ventured carefully. Sarah wiped her eyes, still smiling. I'm sorry. I just realized something. They have no idea who they're dealing with. Ma'am, they have weapons that can destroy planets. We have 19 warships and a lot of hope. They think we'll surrender. Sarah walked to the communications console and entered her command codes. They actually believe that humanity will just roll over because they said so. She opened a channel that bypassed normal diplomatic protocols, connecting directly to Earth. The face that appeared was Admiral James Okoye, commander of the Terran Defense Fleet. He was 62, dark-skinned and broad-shouldered, with scars on his hands from his days as an engineer before the military. Chen. Tell me it's not what I think it is. It's worse, Admiral. The collective just gave us an ultimatum. Dissolve our colonies, surrender our ships, accept occupation, or face destruction. We have 90 hours. Okoye was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. 90 hours. That's almost insulting. They could have at least given us a week. He looked off-screen at someone Sarah couldn't see. Execute Protocol Nightfall. Full implementation. Every asset. Confirmed, Admiral, Sarah said. They wanted to teach us our place, Okoye continued. I suppose it's time we taught them about humanity. Kepler, 7, maintain diplomatic posture. Act scared if you can manage it. Let them think they've won. The real conversation starts in 89 hours. The transmission ended. Sarah turned to her crew, and now her smile was sharp as broken glass. You heard the Admiral. We have work to do. Marcus, send a response to the collective. Tell them we're considering their generous offer and need time to consult with our government. Will they believe that? Marcus asked. They'll believe what they want to believe. That's their first mistake. The truth beneath. What the collective didn't know, what no alien species had discovered in the 60 years since humanity reached the stars, was that humans had been preparing for exactly this moment since the day of first contact. Deep in the asteroid belt of the Sol system, hidden among millions of rocks that all looked the same, were shipyards the size of cities. They had been built slowly, carefully, disguised as mining operations and research stations. Inside them, new ships were born, ships designed with one purpose, to fight enemies more advanced than humanity had any right to challenge. On Mars, beneath the tourist cities and terraforming installations, were weapons laboratories where scientists worked on projects that would make the collective's technology look primitive. Gravity manipulation. Quantum disruption fields. Weapons that didn't just destroy matter but erased it from having ever existed. On Europa, under kilometers of ice, were training facilities where soldiers practiced warfare in environments no human had ever naturally survived. They trained in hard vacuum, in crushing pressure, in radiation that would kill ordinary people in minutes. They trained to fight enemies that could breathe methane or swim through lava or think at speeds that made human reaction time look like slow motion. And on Earth, in a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, were the planners. The strategists who had spent decades studying every alien species humanity had encountered, learning their weaknesses, their fears, their unspoken assumptions. They had prepared for war with enemies more powerful than humanity on every measurable scale. They had prepared for this moment because they had learned the most important lesson from human history: it doesn't matter how powerful your enemy is if you understand them better than they understand themselves. The countdown begins. Aboard Station Kepler 7, Sarah Chen looked out at the 3 alien warships and felt something she hadn't expected. Not fear. Not anger. But a strange kind of anticipation. The collective had declared war on humanity without realizing they had already lost. They saw a young species with limited technology and small territory. They saw prey. They hadn't asked the important questions. They hadn't wondered why a species barely 60 years into space travel had spread so quickly. They hadn't questioned why human ships, supposedly primitive, never seemed to fail at critical moments. They hadn't investigated the gaps in human communication logs, the resources that didn't quite add up, the energy signatures from human space that suggested much more activity than publicly acknowledged. They had made the same mistake that powerful civilizations always made when facing newcomers. They had assumed that their experience and technology meant they understood everything worth knowing. In 88 hours, they would learn what humanity had known for thousands of years: that civilization and technology were not the same as wisdom, and that the most dangerous enemy was the one you underestimated. Sarah smiled at the stars and began preparing for the most important conversation in human history. The collective wanted surrender. They would get an answer, just not the one they expected. The countdown had begun. The hidden truth. When secrets surface. 72 hours remained before the collective's deadline expired. On Earth, in the city of Geneva where the Terran Council met, the streets were calm but the government buildings blazed with light through the night. Inside the council chambers, representatives from every human colony gathered in emergency session, their holographic forms filling seats arranged in ascending circles. Chancellor Maria Santos stood at the center podium, a woman of 57 with silver-streaked hair and the calm demeanor of someone who had spent 30 years navigating political storms. She had been born in the favelas of São Paulo, risen through determination and brilliance to lead humanity's diplomatic corps, and now carried the weight of the species on her shoulders. The situation is clear, she announced to the assembled representatives. The collective has given us an ultimatum that amounts to complete subjugation or destruction. We must respond, and that response will define humanity's future in this galaxy. Representative Dmitry Volkov from the Titan colony stood, his image flickering slightly from the transmission lag. He was a large man with a red beard and the blunt manner of someone who had spent years building habitats in hostile environments. With respect, Chancellor, what response is there? We have 19 warships. They have thousands. We've been in space for 60 years. They've been traveling the stars for 12,000. This isn't a fight we can win. That depends on what you think we've been doing for the last 60 years, came a new voice. Every head turned. The side door had opened and Admiral James Okoye entered, followed by a woman most of the representatives had never seen before. She was small, barely over 5 feet tall, Asian, perhaps 60 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that seemed to calculate everything they observed. She wore a simple black suit with no insignia, no rank, nothing to identify her. Chancellor Santos, representatives, Okoye said formally. This is Dr. Lisa Huang. For the past 40 years, she has directed a project that most of you don't know exists. I think it's time you met. The revelation. Dr. Huang walked to the podium with the confident steps of someone entering familiar territory. She connected a data chip to the council systems and the holographic display changed, showing a star map that looked wrong somehow, like it had too many details. When humanity achieved faster-than-light travel 60 years ago, Huang began without preamble, her voice carrying a slight accent from her native Beijing, we made a collective decision. We could either announce ourselves to the galaxy as innocents seeking friendship, or we could prepare for the possibility that the universe might not be friendly. We did both, she continued. Publicly, we established diplomatic relations. We joined the minor species trade networks. We acted like exactly what we appeared to be, a young, naive civilization thrilled to discover we weren't alone. The star map zoomed in on the Sol system, but now it showed things that weren't in any public database. Stations hidden in the asteroid belt. Facilities on moons that were supposedly uninhabited. Energy signatures that had no official explanation. Privately, we built Project Nightfall. The largest black operation in human history. A project that involved millions of people across all human space, all working toward a single goal, to ensure that if someone decided to destroy or enslave humanity, they would pay a price they couldn't imagine. Representative Sarah Kamani from the Mars colonies spoke up, her voice sharp with anger. You kept this secret? From the Terran Council? From the people who are supposed to represent humanity? Yes, Huang said simply. Because secrets only work if they're kept. Because the moment the collective learned what we were really capable of, they would have acted. And because, frankly, some of you would have tried to stop us. The chamber erupted in arguments. Representatives shouted, demanded explanations, accused the military of operating beyond civilian control. Chancellor Santos let it continue for exactly 30 seconds before she brought her gavel down hard. Enough. Her voice cut through the chaos. Dr. Huang, show us what you've built. The arsenal. The holographic display changed again. Now it showed ships, but not the ones anyone recognized. These were larger, stranger, built with design principles that looked nothing like the conservative engineering of public human vessels. We currently have 147 warships, Huang explained. Not 19. The ships you know about are real military vessels, but they're also decoys. Obsolete technology that we let the collective observe and study. They think they understand human capabilities based on those ships. A ship appeared in the display, rotating slowly. It was beautiful and terrifying, all sharp angles and surfaces that seemed to bend light around them. This is the TRS Shadow of Earth, flagship of our actual fleet. It's 3 times the size of our public dreadnoughts and carries weapons the collective has never encountered. Quantum torpedoes that phase through shields. Graviton beams that can crush ships like tin cans. And most importantly, something we call the Erasure Protocol. What does it do? Volkov asked, his earlier skepticism replaced by cautious interest. It removes things from spacetime, Huang said quietly. Not destroys them. Removes them. As if they never existed. We tested it once, on an uninhabited moon. The moon is gone. The gravitational calculations for that system had to be updated because there's literally less mass than there used to be. The chamber was silent now. Every representative stared at the ships rotating in the holographic display, at weapons that belonged in theoretical physics papers, not military arsenals. How? Kamani asked. How did you build this without anyone noticing? The resources alone. We cheated, Huang said with the ghost of a smile. We told everyone we were mining asteroids for rare elements. We were, but we were also using those asteroids as raw material for shipyards. We claimed we needed research stations to study exotic physics. We did, but those stations were also weapons labs. We sent colony ships to marginal systems and said they failed, lost to accidents. Some did fail. Others became hidden military bases. Admiral Okoye stepped forward. For 60 years, we've been playing a role. Acting weaker than we are. Making mistakes that seemed believable. Letting the collective think they understood us. And all the while, we've been preparing for exactly this moment. The human advantage. But why? Representative Chen Wei from the Luna colonies asked. If we had this capability all along, why not reveal it? Why let the collective push us around? Because we're still weaker than them, Huang admitted. Even with our hidden fleet, even with our advanced weapons, if the entire collective brought their full military force against us, we would lose. Their technology is older, more refined. They have industrial capacity we can't match. They have experience in warfare that spans millennia. Then what's the point? Volkov demanded. The point is that the collective has a fatal weakness, Huang said. They're complacent. They've been the dominant power for so long that they've forgotten how to innovate. Their technology hasn't fundamentally changed in 3,000 years. They've refined it, yes, made it more efficient, but the basic principles are ancient. She pulled up comparison charts showing collective technology versus human developments. They mastered faster than light travel 12,000 years ago. Their FTL drives are magnificent, perfectly engineered, incredibly efficient. But they're based on the same principles they discovered millennia ago. We've had FTL for 60 years, she continued. Our drives are crude by comparison, inefficient, prone to failure. But we've developed 17 different approaches to FTL travel, because we don't know which one is right. We try everything. We experiment. We fail constantly and learn from every failure. The display showed human weapons next to collective equivalents. Their energy weapons are more powerful than ours. Their shields are stronger. Their armor is nearly impenetrable. But all of it follows predictable patterns because it's been perfected over thousands of years. Our weapons are weaker, Huang admitted. But we've designed each one to exploit a different theoretical vulnerability. Some will fail completely. Some will work better than we hope. We don't know which because we're making this up as we go along, and that's our advantage. The strategy. Chancellor Santos leaned forward. Dr. Huang, what you're describing is gambling with human survival. No, Chancellor. I'm describing evolution. Huang's eyes gleamed. The collective species survived because they're perfectly adapted to the galaxy as it existed 12,000 years ago. They're like sharks or crocodiles, apex predators so well designed that they haven't needed to change in millions of years. Humanity survived on Earth because we adapted constantly. We lived in every climate, ate every type of food, invented new tools every generation. We're not apex predators. We're opportunistic omnivores who succeeded by being flexible enough to thrive anywhere. She gestured at the holographic displays. The collective has better technology. We have better adaptation. They have more experience. We have more creativity. They know what works. We're willing to try things that might not work just to see what happens. And most importantly, Admiral Okoye added, they're divided. 3 species in an alliance held together by tradition and mutual benefit. They've never actually fought a war together because there's been no one strong enough to threaten them. They have protocols and plans, but no real experience coordinating their forces in actual combat. Humanity is one species, he continued. We speak different languages and have different cultures, but we're unified in a way they can't comprehend. Every human colony, every ship, every soldier is part of a single species defending its survival. That's a weapon they don't have. The decision. Representative Volkov stood again. His expression had changed from skepticism to something harder to read. So what you're telling us is that we've been secretly building a war machine for 60 years, violating probably a dozen treaties and agreements, all based on the assumption that someday someone would threaten us? Yes, Huang said without apology. And now that threat has arrived, you want to use weapons we barely understand against enemies who have been conquering galaxies since before human civilization existed? Yes. Based on a theory that our inexperience and flexibility will somehow overcome their overwhelming advantages in technology, numbers, and experience. That's correct. Volkov was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was the fierce smile of a man who had spent years building habitats on Titan in conditions that should have killed him. Chancellor Santos, I vote we tell them to go to hell. The chamber erupted again, but this time it was different. Representatives were arguing, yes, but now they were arguing about how to fight, not whether to surrender. Chancellor Santos let them talk for several minutes before calling for order. We need a formal vote, she announced. Dr. Huang, Admiral Okoye, if we refuse the collective's ultimatum and reveal our true capabilities, what are our chances? Huang and Okoye exchanged glances. Honestly? Huang said. Maybe 30%. If everything works perfectly, if all our untested weapons perform as designed, if the collective species fail to coordinate effectively, and if we get very lucky, maybe we survive with enough ships and colonies intact to remain independent. And if we surrender? Santos asked. 100% chance that humanity becomes a servant species for the next several thousand years, Okoye said flatly. Assuming they keep their word and don't just destroy us anyway once we're helpless. Santos looked around the chamber at the representatives of human colonies scattered across 17 star systems. Then I believe we have our answer. All in favor of rejecting the collective's ultimatum and defending human independence. Every hand rose. Not quickly, not casually, but with the weight of people who understood exactly what they were choosing. Opposed? Silence. Then it's unanimous. Santos turned to Okoye and Huang. Admiral, Doctor, you have authorization to implement whatever plans you've prepared. Show the collective what happens when they mistake human adaptability for weakness. The preparation. 48 hours remained. Across human space, the hidden machinery of Project Nightfall came to life. In the asteroid belt, camouflaged shipyards opened like flowers, revealing warships that had been waiting years for this moment. Their crews had trained in secret, running simulations of battles against enemies more powerful than themselves, learning to fight smart rather than fair. On Mars, weapons that had existed only in theory were loaded onto specially designed carriers. Scientists who had spent decades developing impossible technologies now watched their creations leave the labs, hoping desperately that mathematics and models would translate into reality. On Europa and Titan and Ganymede, soldiers boarded dropships, their armor carrying enhancements that pushed human physiology to its absolute limits. They were volunteers, every one, who had trained for a war they hoped would never come. And on Earth, in the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Huang stood before a wall of displays showing the disposition of human forces. She had devoted her entire adult life to this project, sacrificing career, family, any hope of public recognition, all for a plan that might fail spectacularly in the next 2 days. Admiral Okoye joined her, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He offered her one. Second thoughts, he asked quietly. Thousands, she admitted. We're betting everything on theories and untested weapons. If we're wrong, we've just doomed humanity. And if we're right? She smiled slightly. If we're right, the collective is about to learn why you should never assume that age means wisdom, or that power means invincibility, or that a species young and desperate and creative is easier prey than one old and comfortable and set in its ways. They stood together, watching the countdown tick toward zero, toward the moment when humanity would either prove it deserved its place among the stars or discover that some gaps in capability were simply too large to bridge with cleverness and courage. The collective was coming. They expected surrender or swift victory. They were about to learn that humanity had been preparing for this conversation since the day humans first looked at the stars and wondered what else was out there. And that preparation was about to transform from secret hope into terrible reality.